Hi guys, my name is Korpen, and today I thought we would talk a little bit about ammo types for the next tank school video. And I will talk a little bit about the different kinds of ammo and explain in what kind of situation that kind of ammo would be good and what the different kinds of information means that you will find in the game. So we're gonna have a look at 2 tanks. I don't really need to be looking at more tanks to explain my point, and I'm going to try to keep it brief today. I always do ramble, that's my thing, so I don't know whether I will succeed or fail, but we'll have a go at it and we'll see how long this video is, but I would like to keep it under 10 minutes. So yeah, let's get started. And the Russians, they have a lot of different kinds of ammo types, and they can be a bit confusing about what to choose and what not to choose. When you unlock the T-34 1941, you have this kind of round loaded out in the tank as a default, and that is AP HEBC round with the MD5 fuse. And what does that mean? The APHEBC stands for Armor Piercing High Explosive with a ballistic cap shell. And the fuse, now if you do look at the information right below the icons for the rounds, you see that it says projectile mass, and that's the weight of the projectile that you will fire. The muzzle velocity is how far the round will travel within 1 second. And fuse delay, that means how far the round will fly after it has penetrated an armor plate until it explodes. So that means that this round will travel 15 centimeters before it explodes its high explosive filler. And the fuse sensitivity means that it absolutely must penetrate more than 10 millimeters of armor before the fuse delay gets set off. So if you fire at the truck, for example, with this kind of ammo, the likeliness of the shell just passing straight through the truck and never exploding is very high. But if you fire at another T-34 and you hit it where the shell will penetrate, the other T-34 has more armor than 10 millimeters, so that means that 15 centimeters after you penetrated those 10 millimeters of armor, the shell will explode, and it will, in this case, it will be something like a shotgun shell inside the tank, killing everything around it. And this tank has a similar ammo, but with a different fuse, and that fuse is the MD8 fuse. And what's the difference then? Well, this kind of tank ammo has to penetrate a bit more armor, and that is 15 millimeters. But after those 15 millimeters, it will travel 0.9 meters, that is 90 centimeters. And when talking about penetration on the tank, that will translate something into, let's say the tank gets penetrated right here in the front, on the front hull here, or the upper glacis. The shell will then travel almost 1 meter into the tank before it explodes. So if the tank gets hit here in the driver's hatch, the shell will travel through the driver, killing him, and then explode somewhere in the lap of the aimer or the commander of the tank, and that will obviously kill him and kill the loader as well as it has already killed the driver. Most probably the shell will also ignite the fuel tank and the ammo racks around the crew here. So that's goodbye from that tank. Whereas with the MD5 fuse, that only had 15 centimeters of travel time before the explosion, it would be the case that the shell would penetrate at the same place, and then it would explode right in front of the driver. So it's possible that the driver would soak up a lot of damage, but probably the commander or slash aimer or the loader would also get killed. The difference between the tank ammo types here is that the first one with the MD5 fuse has a lot less of armor penetration than the MD8 fuse has. So in this case, the MD8 fuse shell is a much better round to use all round. And the T-34s also use a different kind of round that is a normal metal slug ammo type, which is called APBC, and that stands for the Armor Piercing Ballistic Cap shell. And what does that mean? Well, it means that the round will have the roughly same projectile mass, and it has a better muzzle velocity, and it will pierce more armor, up to 105 millimeters of armor in the best case scenario. But this round lacks fuse delay, and it doesn't really have an HE filler either. So that just means that that round will pierce a hole in the tank, and it will continue to travel through the tank until it can't penetrate more armor. So what that means is that if you hit the tank here, where the armor is slightly less, that means that the shell will penetrate and it will cause a hole, and the armor that gets punched out of the armor plate will fragmentate around inside the tank. Then the shell will just travel straight through the tank and out through here, because that shell has more penetration than 90 millimeters of armor, so nothing else will happen. So if you use those normal APBC shells or AP rounds, I think they're called AP rounds in the American tanks, you certainly have to know where you're aiming, because you need to snipe crewmen in order to kill tanks, or you need to snipe ammo racks for those kinds of shells to be really effective. And the next kind of round we're gonna talk about is the APCR shell that the Panther A, amongst other, use. And those rounds have a high velocity. They travel a lot of distance in a short time. They are lacking the fuse delay, and they don't have a high explosive filler. So that means that if you penetrate the tank, which you will probably do with a shell like this, since it has a very high penetration value, you need to snipe crewmen in order to knock out the tank. In reality, it would be a different matter, you know, because this round would actually cause a pressure change that would be so fierce or immense inside the tank that the pressure change would kill the crew. But whereas in War Thunder that doesn't happen inside the tank. You don't kill crewmen by causing a pressure change inside the tank. You don't ignite the atmosphere inside the tank, for example. So you're a lot better off just using the normal AP CBC shells. You can see here that the German Panther A also has an AP CBC shell, and it's a fairly good one at that. It has a good muzzle velocity, and it has a fuse delay of 1.2 meters, so that means that the shell will travel well inside the tank before it explodes. However, this kind of shell does need to pierce a lot of ammo, seeing that the fuse sensitivity sits at 25 millimeters of armor. So you really need to hit a target that has more armor than 25 millimeters. If you don't, you're better off just using the normal Sprengranat, since that shell has a shorter fuse delay and a fuse sensitivity of 0.5 millimeters of armor. So that means that it needs something to detonate, or it needs something that will trigger the ammo, so to speak. So it doesn't need to hit an armor plate. It can hit the crewman operating a flak truck, for example, and that will trigger the shell. So yeah. Hopefully this video hasn't been all too confusing, and hopefully you've learned something about the shells. Let me know what kind of shells you most commonly use when you're playing the different tanks in the game. I tend to use the APC-BC shells or just normal AP-HE rounds. They're great since they have a huge amount of explosive power once they've penetrated the tank, and I tend to save my APCR rounds or my normal AP slug rounds for tanks that have more armor, and when using those I try to snipe crewmen. Whereas if I'm just using the normal APC-BC shells, I can just aim for whatever, just as long as the shell will penetrate the tank or the armor plate. I'm certain that I will cause a lot of damage to the tank. Whereas using APCR rounds, I might have to shoot, let's say, 4 rounds into a tank to be able to knock it out. But using the AP-HE rounds, I would often just use 1 or 2 at most to knock out the tank. And certainly the first round would definitely cripple the enemy tank to such an extent that it can't return the fire. Whereas when using the APCR rounds, you will probably take return fire before you knock out the tank if you only use the APCR. But anyway, let me know what you guys use, and it seems like I did actually break the 10-minute mark, so sorry for that. I tried to keep it short today, but I failed as usual. So thank you all for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys around in the next video.